All right. It is such an honor to be in a room with so much excellence. It really is. My name is Jade Curtis. I am the executive editor of blackdoctor.org, and I am so thrilled to be the moderator for this next conversation about chronic skin conditions. Because this is so much more than just a conversation about what's visible on the surface. It's about access, it's about trust, it's about being seen and heard and treated with dignity, and it's about breaking down the barriers that have kept far too many people, especially people of color, from getting the care that they deserve. UCB has made a powerful commitment to inclusion, and today's panel is a shining example of that. What's most impressive about these experts and leaders in dermatology, advocacy, and access, they aren't just aligned in purpose, they're also all on the same team, right, ladies? Absolutely. And that, yes. And so that kind of unity is rare. And it's exactly what makes this conversation so impactful. So to begin, I'd love for each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, but instead of doing traditional bios, I'd love to hear something personal. What brought you to this work? What was that moment or that story or that experience that made you passionate about helping people manage and live well with chronic conditions? And so I want to start with Ms. Rhonda. And I actually want to call out one thing. I know Derek just mentioned it, but she's actually one of our 2016 Top Blacks in Healthcare honorees. Yes. So Rhonda, we are so happy to have you back. And please share with us what makes you so passionate about your work.
Thank you. And quickly before I get started, I too want to congratulate blackdoctor.org on the longevity, the 20 years of really, really great work and important work. And what stands out to me was the outreach that was provided during COVID. The ability to reach so many people with education around vaccinations and what to look out for and how to be healthy and sustain themselves through that, I think was hugely important. Thank you. So thank you for the save. I appreciate that. Again, I'm Rhonda Peebles, and I am the Vice President and Head of U.S. Dermatology at UCB. And I come to UCB, I've been at UCB 5 years, and I come from a long background at J&J and also at Novartis. And I am thrilled to be on the panel with these fabulous women who will be future leaders in healthcare, no doubt. The thing that brings me to this space is, and I'm gonna date myself, is as a child, watching television and the late news with my mother. And one show in particular that we used to watch a lot was Quincy MD. Who remembers Quincy MD? And I was always fascinated by his findings and what brought him to understand why, what might have caused the death of someone. And as I was growing up, I encouraged my mother to chase ambulances for me. I could not drive. And so if an ambulance passed us on the highway, I was quick to say, do we have time? Can you follow them? Oddly enough, she did, which probably says more about her than it says about me. So I was always curious about healthcare, and not just the diseases that we have that people can suffer from, but also what led to outcomes. And so even now, as I'm sitting watching television, going through my phone, it would not be rare to find me doing research on perhaps a disease that I just heard about or learned about, and what that actually does and how it manifests itself and who it most often affects. I'm just a geek in that way. But yeah, so I would go all the way back to Quincy MD.
Thank you for sharing.
Hi, I'm Ellisha Clay, and I've been with UCB for 9 years next Friday. I've spent the last 4.5 years supporting Rhonda as her executive assistant, and also working closely with all of these ladies to help support our dermatology and patient teams. As far as a personal story, a lot of people don't know this, but I am a freelance makeup artist on the weekends. And I used to focus so much on using makeup to cover up all the imperfections and not really focusing on what's going on with the skin. Why am I breaking out? Why do I have hyperpigmentation? And it wasn't until I stepped into the derm space that I really started to focus on why it's important to take care of your skin. So I really love supporting leaders who are committed to helping patients achieve healthy skin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charity Williams, and I have been with UCB for 4 years now, and I lead patient marketing as it relates specifically to our indication supporting hidradenitis suppurativa, which I know we'll spend a little more time on talking about that. My personal story is a little bit broader. I've always been fascinated in marketing, and I knew I wanted to get into something that actually allowed me to help people. And I know oftentimes pharma does get a bad rap, but I think when you have the opportunity to work in a space where you're really helping people, and certainly for me, helping create more representation. So oftentimes, we don't see people that look like us in advertising, or that same level of options or care doesn't get to people that look like me specifically. And so I can either complain about that, or I can kind of join the inside and hopefully make some changes. And so I really want to help people that look like me, my friends, your families, to really get the best care and the options that they need.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Logan Howard. I am an associate director, also on Charity's team. I've been at UCB for about 3.5 years supporting dermatology, and really happy to be here. My personal story, I would say, probably like most of us, I had really, really, really bad acne, and it was embarrassing. And I remember vividly, I won't say his name, but in the 8th grade, where I had really bad acne on my forehead, and this kid was like, I could connect the dots on your forehead. And it was the worst, but that really took a hit on my confidence and my self-esteem. So I educated myself. My parents took me to a dermatologist, and I knew the things I needed to do to clear my skin. And so at that moment, I knew, like, when I get older, I want to be in a field and in a space where I can make people feel better about themselves by giving them the tools to educate themselves, get the care that they need. And of course, I'm talking about acne, and what I work in is truly the chronic illness, but the impact is still there, right? Having those foundational skills. And yeah, so that's kind of why I married, my own experience with what we do today, and being able to just kind of make people feel better about themselves and giving them the confidence to be able to kind of, get back to feeling comfortable before having something on their skin that everyone sees.
My name is Cheryl Westbrook, and I am the Director of HCP Marketing for HS, or hidradenitis suppurativa. So I work very closely with Charity, but I also have the privilege of being part of the team that Rhonda has assembled to take UCB forward into the next decade of growth. It's a privilege, it's an honor, and it gives me an opportunity to make a contribution towards those individuals who are living with chronic diseases. And so my story, having been in this pharma life for over 30 years, I started when I was 10, pharma prodigy. My story is more about what keeps me in this life and wanting to work to help individuals who are living with diseases like HS, which isn't rare by the numbers. There are a lot of individuals walking around with the burden of this disease. However, it has a lot of the characteristics of rare. 7 to 10 years to diagnosis. Then when they finally realize what they have, that burden of not having approved treatments for their illness. And so in my way, I want to do what I can to change that dynamic. So that's my motivation, and that's my connection.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Tiffany Crawford. I am the head of U.S. Marketing and Dermatology. I report in to Ms. Rhonda Peebles. I have been with UCB for 5 years, and I have a very personal story as to why I love skin and why I want to focus on skin conditions. My son, Austin, these ladies know Austin very well. Shortly after birth, he was diagnosed with a rare skin condition, EB, epidermolysis bullosa. And what this is that it's a protein that's missing from the skin that prevents the skin from remaining intact. And the journey to his diagnosis, which the appropriate diagnosis came 18 months after he was born, was rather bumpy. But I'm relentless. I think that you can see that. I did not take, oh, he has eczema or he has impetigo. Well, I'm sorry, his skin is missing from his feet. I think it's something different. To continue to push to get the right diagnosis and the right specialist. So fast forward to 12 years now, Austin's 12 years old. He's a thriving little individual, a star competitive soccer player, a straight A student, and he keeps me on my toes often. I often ask myself, because I was in the medical space, I knew the right questions to ask. I was well connected to push to say that, no, we're not gonna wait 9 months to his next appointment. I'm gonna get him in 3 months. Many individuals do not have that access. And so what pushed me, what keeps me getting up every morning is that I truly believe that if you have skin, and especially those individuals with various skin tones, you deserve to have the best access to care, especially since your skin is the first thing that everyone sees when you walk into a room. So that's my story.
Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing that. I mean, whether it's your own personal story or inspired by family, we can feel the passion from all of you. So thank you so much. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Ms. Rhonda, can you please help us understand the lens of every shade of care? How can we best help people care for their skin? And can specific skin conditions impact people differently?
Thank you for the question. I first want to start by saying at UCB, there's a motto that every time you Google UCB, you'll see right next to the company name. And that is inspired by patients, driven by science. And I can tell you that as an organization, we truly do live to that. Patients are always at the forefront of our minds and the decision-making process at the company. I think that one thing that I encourage everybody to get a further understanding on is in the field of dermatology. We can talk about skin and making people feel better. Oftentimes when you mention dermatology, people think about cosmetics. They think about cosmetic dermatology, right? The field that our diseases roll up to is medical dermatology, and there is a difference. Many of us, whether it's for ourselves, a family member, a child, the first dermatologist that you go to is likely going to be the cosmetic dermatologist, right? Because there's more of them. And so think Botox, think, fillers, all of those things. And that's fine. A lot of those physicians are also educated in medical dermatology, but there's a lot of them that don't, right? Their business or their practices may be built on Botox and all of those things that are out of pocket for patients, where in medical dermatology, it's where you want to go if you believe that something is eczema, or if it's psoriasis, or if it's hidradenitis suppurativa. And I know you can't watch television these days without seeing an eczema commercial and a psoriasis commercial, so those may be top of mind for you. But I want to pause for a minute and talk about hidradenitis suppurativa. It's probably something you haven't heard about. It disproportionately affects people of color. And I know that there's many of us who in our childhood probably played with a friend who seemed to always had a boil under their arm. And as you're speaking to them and you're asking questions about it, they may say, oh, it's nothing. My mother has it. My grandmother had it. I need to go home and soak in a tub of Epsom salt. That is not just boils. That actually is a chronic condition that has to do with the inflammatory processes in our bodies. And just recently, there's more and more research around that, more and more information that's been published, and we know so much more about it. As Cheryl mentioned, it's not rare. It is truly not rare. What is rare is the diagnosis, right? Those boils may become so painful that people land in the emergency room looking for relief. And emergency room physicians are not as educated around it. So what are they gonna do? They're gonna lance, they're gonna pack, they're gonna send you home. And guess what? You'll probably be there again in a few months. And there's no need to, right? There's solutions. There's solutions finally out here. So I think it's important that everything starts with education. And we certainly at UCB will do our part as we gain more and more patient insights to make sure that we're putting that back out into the community in the form of education.
You know, I love that you mentioned the different forms of dermatologists. I think a lot of people do look to those cosmetic ones without realizing that they don't have all the insights and information. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm realizing that misinformation is one of those barriers that people often face. So Tiffany, can you talk about what are some of the other barriers that patients face when they're trying to prevent proper treatment and care, or some of the things that get in the way of proper treatment and care? Excuse me.
Thank you for the question. I think that I'll start off with certain individuals and populations just by nature frequent physicians' offices less frequently. When it comes to dermatologists, that's even less. And some of the reasons are because of cultural differences or proximity to a dermatologist that's in their location. What I will say, and I've mentioned this earlier, that the skin is your largest organ. And we need to continue to educate individuals that you need to seek care for your skin. Now, as Rhonda and Cheryl mentioned earlier, there are critical skin conditions like HS and psoriasis, where we have websites that offer information. MakeHistory.com, where it educates individuals about the conditions, about dermatologists, about the symptoms, and also some of the questions that one can ask so that they're not so burdened by fear in having those discussions. There's the NPF website. So again, research to arm yourself when you're preparing for visits. The other thing that I will say, and Cheryl and I have this conversation, or we have this conversation often, is that we have to have the discussion amongst one another. As Rhonda mentioned earlier, we need to be okay with saying, hey, I had this spot. Do you know anyone that has had something very similar? The other thing that we have to be comfortable with and empower individuals is not be afraid to push back. I always say that just because an individual has a white coat does not mean that that individual is right. And because of that, challenging and asking questions to get to a proper diagnosis. And lastly, advocating for one another. I think that is key, and how we can push to ensuring that patients, individuals of all skin colors, get the proper care.
Absolutely. And so as we're pushing for these proper diagnoses and having these important conversations, Cheryl, can you tell us what we can do to see improvements in earlier detection and accurate diagnoses?
Sure. So in addition to some of the things that Tiffany was mentioning, increasing education and improving awareness about how these chronic skin conditions can appear across the spectrum of skin tones, we also need to empower patients. And when I say patients, I mean our mothers, our fathers, sisters, brothers, extended family members. Empower them to take early action. And what does that look like? That means that instead of what we usually do, waiting until the symptoms that we feel are so intense that they are beyond our control, at the first sign of those symptoms, start seeking care. Start asking questions of healthcare providers. And if the answers don't seem right, as Tiffany mentioned, advocate for yourself. Ask more questions. Seek answers from other healthcare providers. But what we really need to make sure that individuals are doing is leaning into the opportunity to compress the time to diagnosis. So earlier activation gives an opportunity for earlier diagnosis. And as individuals show up and seek care, they're going to find that, as Rhonda mentioned, there are a number of treatment advances that will improve the outcomes of their diseases, such as eczema, HS, which we've mentioned, and in psoriasis, where treatments have gone from producing outcomes of 50% skin clearance to 100% clear skin. So showing up, advocating for yourself early. Earlier action results in earlier diagnosis, which eventuates in, earlier treatment, better results in inhibition of disease.
Thank you. You mentioned the importance of advocating for yourself, asking questions. And, at blackdoctor.org, that's what we're all about. We're about empowering the patient. All of our content is how to do it. You can do it content. So we teach our audience how to advocate for themselves, how to have those proper conversations, and to be an active participant within their health. So I think that's super important to start having more of those conversations with your doctor and amongst the people around you. Absolutely. And so as we're talking about, some of the ways that we have guided our audience and educated our audience, I want to talk about some of the leaders and who they are partnering with and how they are thinking differently to disrupt the system and improve access for all. Charity, can you tackle that question?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think that's important. And specifically what you said just before this, blackdoctor.org is a great resource, obviously someone who we see as a critical partner to ours when it comes to reaching different audiences. But I think what's also important and can often be missed is like, what messages are you putting there? Right? When you're going to different audiences, you must have messages and content that resonates, and that's been really important to us. So the Make History campaign that Tiffany referenced a few minutes ago, if you visit that website, makehistory.com, you can see that it is a very inclusive campaign. There are various shades of skin tones there, and that's very intentional, right? Rhonda said earlier, this is a disease that has a higher prevalence in skin of color, and so it only makes sense. But I think oftentimes it's something that's so missed. And so it's the key partnerships, and it's also the content that we're placing there. And I think that's really important. And the one last thing I'll say about that is, someone said it on a panel earlier, it's really about knowing who the patient is and who that audience is. And so we've spent a ton of time not only getting to understand and learning the insights of those patients, how they're approaching their condition, maybe why it's different based on the communities that they are a part of, but also building real relationships with them. Because I think when you can see who you're helping, it's much easier to help them. It's much easier to build solutions for them, or have them be a part of building those solutions with you to ultimately resonate with themselves and their peers. And so that's something I urge us all to think about. And, our day-to-day world, however we're treating our health or however we are approaching healthcare, it's not just somebody who is so distant from us. Often it's our neighbors. Often it's the people we played with growing up that have boils or have psoriasis or whatever we're dealing with. It's helping someone personal, and I think that allows us to partner with certain partners like BDO differently. So,
thank you so much for that. Logan, I want to ask you this next question. So what are some of the signs or trends that show that we're making progress in working together toward a common goal for an important cause, such as this one?
Yeah, I think when you see like kind of the evolution of how we've been able to come, when we talk about HS, we heard one of the patients that we work with saying that what HS is what psoriasis was 10 years ago. So I think it's exciting to see what is to come. If I had to put it into, I don't know if I would say trends, but I think one of the most important things is talking about family history. Is that something that we think it sounds like it might be something new, but it's really not. We've talked about boils, and these are things that people have talked about probably for generations. We just never put a name on it. So I would say that would be one of the more important things. And then secondly, forming those relationships with patients. We know that it's important. Everything we do is built on the insight of the patients, but what about putting a name to the face and really forming those relationships? I think that's one of the things we're so proud of, is because when you talk to someone with HS, the last word probably on their list is trust, right? They have distrust they've seen several dermatologists, they've been misdiagnosed, they've been unheard for years, for decades, for a lot of their life. And so for us, we wanted to be intentional about forming those relationships with these patients. And it's great when you talk about the metrics and the success of the campaign and all the things, but I think what we're most proud of is that when patients that we've worked with, when they talk about us, they talk about UCB, they say, you're doing it differently. Like you're setting the standard, and this is what all companies should be doing. So to see HS and you hear about pharma and kind of forming that word trust in there is something that these patients, this is new. And so I think that that's what we're most proud of. And I don't know if I would say that's a trend either, but something that everyone can do regardless of the industry that you're in or, whether you work in dermatology or something else, but really forming those relationships and really thinking differently.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's incredible what you guys do at UCB. I mean, obviously your impact is reflected on this stage, as we've mentioned, but I'm sure it's reflected in those that you have changed and improved their lives. So absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And as we talk about UCB, I want to shift internally to the inclusive leadership you've been able to support at UCB, Ellisha. How has that experience, especially working with a team as passionate as these ladies on the stage, how has that experience, the issues that were discussed shaped the perspectives on your career and the possibilities within corporate America?
I would say that supporting these leaders up here has been a wonderful experience. It's really reshaped the way that I see career growth and corporate America. I've been presented with many opportunities from Rhonda. Being here was an opportunity I was presented with, and I'm very grateful for that. And it's just been very inspiring. These ladies, they show up every day. I don't know how they do it. Even on the hardest days, they show up, they deliver, and they're really all about opportunities for growth, and I'm really appreciative of being here and being with them and growing.
She's being modest. She's a rock star.
Absolutely, I can tell. I know this whole panel is killing it. So I want to ask the whole panel, I'm so grateful that you all have shared some of your experiences and really gotten deeper into your areas of expertise. But I do want to ask all of our panelists, what is one way that everyone in our audience can do something to contribute to making sure all people are getting proper skincare? Ms. Rhonda, can I start with you?
I would say just what we've said before. It's education. I think all of us have a responsibility to be educated. I think also because we are in healthcare, we also can be someone's advocate. We can be an advocate for someone every day. It could be a family member. It could be a neighbor. We are used to the healthcare landscape. We can Google something and understand the language. And I think that as we reach out to those around us, don't be afraid to say, I mean, I know it's people's personal business, what they're going through, but asking, how can I help? And doing some of the legwork for them. The generation prior to myself was the generation of going to a physician's office and taking the physician's word as gospel. And we are probably on the cusp or the front end, the tip of the spear for the generation that doesn't settle for that. And so I think we have an opportunity to be there for others.
Love that.
I think it kind of goes back to what Tiffany was saying about just advocating for yourself, like making sure you're going to your doctor, checking up on yourself, and if you don't think something's right, like to keep pushing it because you know your body better than anyone else.
Absolutely. Be an active participant. Charity.
I would say listening, for people living with any condition, certainly a condition like HS that may be embarrassing or may show up in places that they are uncomfortable discussing. If they come to you, they have been suffering for quite a while. They are now finally feeling like they can tell someone. And I think recognizing that probably was a very, very difficult step for them. And so you can't dismiss it. You must listen. And you, as Rhonda said and Ellisha said, I think it's so important to then say, how can I help? What can I do? Let's do it together. We're going to figure this out. Versus just saying, oh, your mom's had those, or my mom had those, it's a boil, or whatever, or like, it'll go away, you just need some water, take a ginger ale, we love a little ginger ale. So, I mean, I think there are real things, it's taking things seriously, and helping people get the right help.
Yeah, I would say truly to be your own advocate. I think Tiffany made a great point. You see someone in a white coat and you're like, oh my gosh, they're way smarter than me. They know more than me, but no one knows you more or better than yourself. And so I think it's empowering patients no matter what, everyone here, and no matter what you're living with. But that you can push back. You can push back on anyone, and the doctor cannot tell you how you're feeling. You know exactly how that is. So just empowering them that, you only get one body once, and so that you can feel confident to go in that office, even though they might be in a white coat, but you can push back and really push for what it is that you want.
I would say communicate more and expect more. I was raised by a generation where you didn't talk about things. If you got hurt, but you could still get up out of bed, you were going to work or you were going to school. So communicate, ask questions. I see that you have this skin condition. Let's go and get that checked out, but then expect more. In a climate where we may be discouraged to stand up and show up for ourselves and voice what's going on with us, it's okay to say, I'm going to show up and I am going to not just expect more, I'm going to demand more.
Yes, I agree with everything that everyone has said on this panel. And I was sitting here trying to think about what we can do that's a little bit different. All of us in this room, we know clinicians, we know physicians that look like us, some that do not. And for the ones that do not look like us, I say that we challenge them how to treat and serve patients of different skin tones.
Absolutely. And I second everything that you all have said. I mean, I tried to get my points in, but you guys took them all. So you guys got it covered. And so while we've spoken directly to the patient with that one, I also want to ask you, how can the physician community make our patients feel more comfortable talking about things that are uncomfortable? And so I want to start at that end this time.
I'll build off of where I landed. It's, many of our physicians, especially when it comes to skin, they were not educated on different skin hues. And so, as I mentioned before, like, we have connections. We can set up programs with what are those discussions? What are those cultural norms that they may not be used to, that they have to understand? The other thing that I would say, and this is something that we discuss as a team, is to teach a physician or teach clinicians to have discussions with patients as if it was their mother. Let's not use the Latin terms. Let's break it down so that patients can understand what you're saying and help them to advocate and make the right decisions for themselves.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I think that it's also building relationship and trust with the patient. Many times, once an individual shows up for care, it can be very intimidating. They may have been dismissed before, and so the last thing they're feeling is trust, right? Especially given some of the history of certain populations and groups on the healthcare landscape. So getting to know your patient. I think there was an example shared before where a clinician went to a patient's church, ended up going to the cookout, started to understand and know more about that patient's world, build trust, because then you can recommend certain care and the individual or the patient would be more receptive.
Yeah, I would say I totally agree. I would say, I know we talked about listening, and it sounds simple, but it's so important. We talk about HS, and it is in areas that are, underneath the arm, but in the groin, like very sensitive areas that you don't want to talk about. And I know we mentioned this too, when a patient comes in, like, I have talked about this my whole life. Like, I am at wit's end and there's nothing else that I can do. And sometimes these patients just need, I just need a dermatologist that will listen to me, because I have been dismissed time after time after time again, and they might be the 10th doctor that they've seen. So listening goes a really long way in hopes of kind of switching this very uncomfortable and sensitive topic and area into something that's a little bit more comfortable so they feel more normalized.
In addition to everything these ladies said, I would say don't be afraid to not be the expert. And I think that's something that in every career path or in every industry we all learn, and it's humbling, but I think it's entities and engagements like this where you can meet other people that are experts in things that maybe you're not. And maybe it is referring your patient to maybe someone else because you can't do anything else, and that's okay, or you've done all the things that you know to do, but you've built relationships, which I also think speaks to your ability to treat broadly, right? And so being able to say, I don't know any more than I do right now, and I need to potentially point in another direction. And I think patients as well should also be okay saying, this isn't the right fit, let me go somewhere else, or let me find the right fit. And so that has to happen on both sides.
I would just echo what was already said about building trust and listening to the patients, and also having empathy, because I can imagine it's really hard to go in there and be vulnerable. So I would just say that those three things, I think, are some things that physicians could work on with their patients.
I think if we're being honest with ourselves, I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we have to embrace the fact that being a physician, treating patients is these days more of a business, right? And whether you're in private practice or part of a healthcare system, time is money. And most physicians have somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes to see their patients. I can tell you that other physicians, it's even less time than that. So listening when time is ticking sometimes can become a hard thing to do. But I particularly think for patients of color, that time is so critical, and listening becomes even more critical. We all know the stories about how when people of color come, whether they're an inpatient or just coming into a physician office, when they're saying that they're in pain, oftentimes they're looked at as a drug seeker. This person just wants more, right? So dropping the biases, I believe, is truly, truly important. And so marrying that with the small window of time that you have, I think, is what sets really great physicians from the rest.
Ladies, thank you all so much for joining us today and sharing your insights, passion. Am I cutting in it? There we go. Trade again. For sharing your insights and your passion with us. Today's conversation really reminds me that skin health is not just what we see. It's about access, it's about equity, and it's about truly being heard. And so I want to carry that forward by making sure everyone feels empowered to seek care, to speak up and support others in doing the same. Because everyone deserves to be seen, supported, and comfortable in the skin that they're in. So ladies, thank you once again. Thank you all for joining us.